for AccuMark, and I am going to go over the updates for AccuMark 3D version 12. So this will be part 1 of AccuMark 3D What's New. And we're going to start by going over changes that will affect Model Editor and pattern design and the 3D workspace within pattern design. So with that said, the first thing to note is that we do have a Blender upgrade. So when you receive your V12 license and you're ready to install, you will also need to install a new Blender version. If you are upgrading from 11 or any version prior, you will need a new Blender. All right, so one of the other things to note before we get started, that's just a fun little tidbit, is we have added to our library of avatars. So in version 12, you have 10 new avatars, and these avatars are the same size, proportion, and shape as 10 of the avatars that we provided in version 11. Only in version 12, we have made it so that those avatars can move their arms to an arms down position. So they will actually be 2 different avatars. You'll have one in your avatars folder that will say a pose in the name, and then you'll have one that does not say a pose. The one that does not say a pose is the avatar that will move its arms down. It'll move its arms down once the simulation has begun in the Blender 3D viewport. The setup for the pieces in pattern design will be on an A pose avatar. So both of the avatars will look the same in the setup, but in Blender, when you start the simulation, one avatar will put its arms down in about 30 frames. All right, so we have a few things that we can point out here in AccuMark Explorer, one of those being the option added to define defaults. So when you create a new model from either AccuMark Explorer or Pattern Design or Model Editor, it always provides a default avatar of Jill and a default fabric table of fabrictable.csv. Well, we've added the ability to define in your user settings which fabric table you would like to have as your default and which avatar you would like to have as your default. Again, these are by user. So your user settings will be only for your system unless you share your user settings with someone else. But you can go through and define your own default avatar. Then when you create a model, I'm going to apply and click OK. And I'm just going to grab some pieces and create a model here. Open with Model Editor. The fabric table you defined as well as the avatar you defined will be your defaults. So now I have demo table, and then if I go here and see the avatar that I applied is my default avatar. So that should save some users some time and get rid of some repetitive steps. I don't think anyone is using Jill as a default avatar anymore. So instead of just changing the default, we make it definable. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open Pattern Design. Actually, I don't want to start with that style. I am going to start with my polo. All right. So one of the other things that we've done that you guys will find helpful with pieces, I don't have any applicable pieces here. I'm going to create one. We have added the ability to define a fold line on a mirror line. So I'm going to just go ahead and apply a fold. Oops, maybe I should apply the mirror line first. Let me mirror this piece. There we go. And then I'm going to go to 3D, create fold. And I just click the line that I want to be a fold line. In this case, it's my mirror line. I already have my values defined here. So I'm going to click there. Once I click on the mirror line, it opens the piece for me so that I can select which side should fold back. And then as soon as I select the side to fold back, the piece will return to its folded shape. And if I view fold, you can see my fold properties are there. So we can get rid of that guy. All right, so now I am going to go ahead and open 3D. So one of the first things you'll notice in V12 is that the ribbon looks a bit different. So we have been adding new features, so we needed to make room for them. So what we did was we made some of the icons small, like you see in the PDS 2D ribbon. And we've also added some features and some split buttons. What we tried to do was reorganize this so that it matches a workflow a bit better. So you'll start with piece. And we have some cool new options that I'll go over in a moment in the piece tab, in the piece panel, sorry. But if you're going to place pieces and begin by setting your pieces up, we thought that was the panel that should go first. And then that'll be followed by relationships and arrangements, and then cylinders, and then sizes, simulation, and then view options. Way down here on the end, you also have an avatar panel, and this will be where you can define body positions or use the new avatar edit platform. All right, so that's our new ribbon. And with these split buttons, just like in PDS, you click down on the button and it will bring out the other options for you. I don't have my avatar window up, so it won't go down here, but that's fine. We'll look at that a little bit later. All right. So something I know lots of people are going to be excited about, and over the past few versions, we've been working really hard at trying to make it less and less necessary to set up 3D information in the model. So I'm going to bring my avatar window back. And with this particular garment, I have some pieces that need to layer one over the other. So for example, down here with my polo, these pieces will go on like so, with one of these pieces layering over the other. In version 11 and prior to that, you would have to go into Model 3D Garment Properties in your right-click menu to define those layers. Well, in V12, you can do it right here in the work area. I'm going to go to my piece panel. So that's now the first panel here in the ribbon for the 3D work area. I'm going to click Piece Properties. Now, when I click on Piece Properties, notice over here, I have all of the options that are in that second tab, that 3D Garment Info tab from my model. So when I want to change the layer of a piece, I click the piece. All of the information for that piece now populates in this window here. So I have all of these properties that I can adjust right here. But in this case, I'm just going to change my layering. So I change the layer and I strike the Enter key. Notice the layer of that piece has changed. I can tell because the color changed. And now if I want to select another piece, I can select my next piece. All right. You also have multi-select. So you can grab multiple pieces at once and change their layer or any of the other information. What's important to know about multiple pieces, and when we're talking about how this function works, think very much about using Microsoft Word. Say you have a paragraph with lots of different fonts. You highlight the whole paragraph and you change the font. It's going to change the font on all of them to be the same font. Same sort of thing here. So you'll notice I selected these pieces in my multi-select, and they have the same as input. They have the same orientation, body position, wrap type, and layer. What was different is the position. When you have multi-selected several pieces and they have values that are different, those fields will now become blank. If you were to change this position, it's going to change both of those pieces to having the same position. If you make no changes to that position, so say for example, I just change my layer to 0, then it doesn't change those properties. So now if I click here, you see this is still a front. And if I click here, you see this is still a back. So that information didn't change, but I was able to select both of those pieces to change the layer. So I'm actually going to just go ahead and change that back to 1. There we go. So piece properties, very excited about it. It's right here in your piece options. So this gives you the option to change all of those properties that go in that Model 3D Garment Editor or your 3D Info tab of your model. You can change those right here in PDS. Something else to note is in version 11, we did make some changes to the controls and handles for cylinders. And in version 12, we made those a little bit easier to use. Don't worry, no big changes this time. We just made one small change that I think will make a big difference to some users. If I go into my move cylinder function here and grab one of my cylinders, I have halos now. And this is what we added in version 11. There are halos to control the girth of the entire cylinder, or just the circumference of the top or circumference of the bottom. And then you have a sphere that controls the north and south pole of your cylinder. So if I look from another angle, you can see that those spheres sort of represent the top and bottom of that cylinder. And one of the issues that we had in V11 is that when you're looking straight on, a lot of times your sphere would be inside of this halo, and you want to select the sphere, but you can't because the halo's in the way. Well, now when you're looking from an angle that's straight on, the sphere will appear to be on top of the halo so that you can select that easier, and you still have plenty of room to select the halo. So your sphere will appear on top of your halo when you're in this angle. So again, really simple. So if you've gotten accustomed to these from V11, good job. Now we made it a little bit easier so that you can click where you want to click without anything getting in your way. Super. Okay, so you may notice with this particular style, my pieces are all out of whack. That's intentional. So this piece is actually set up to have an avatar for each one of my graded sizes. So if I look at my largest size, we can see the positions there. And also for my smallest size, oops, let me just grab her collar. I want to move that up just a little bit. There we go, perfect. So double check the back. Not too bad. All right, so I have my largest size set up pretty nicely, and I have also gone ahead and set up my smallest size. So my pies are already in the oven for you. I didn't make you watch me set those up completely. Because one of the features that we've added in V12 will help users a lot with graded sizes, and that's the ability to extrapolate between sizes. And what I mean by that is, for this example, I went ahead and set up my smallest size and my largest size only. The rest of the sizes, you'll see the pieces are still all over the place, right? Well, extrapolate, let me just go to my medium so we could see this. Extrapolate will use the largest size and the smallest size as a reference and blend everything in between. So if I go to extrapolate all, which is nested under my sync positions, see, it positions the pieces for me. And not only did it do my medium, it did my large, and it did my small. So I've tested this on size lines that have up to 12 sizes in them, and it worked pretty beautifully. And if you think about this, especially in garments where you have lots of pieces, where the setup is pretty complicated, sometimes you don't want to have to go through and set it up for each size. All right, now we're going to move ahead to another style. I want to show you some other fun new tricks that you'll like playing with in V12. I'm going to open my Skater in Model Editor so that we can talk about defining 3D positions based on your piece categories or piece descriptions. Now, every one of our AccuMark customers has their own way of managing piece categories or piece descriptions. Some people don't use them at all. Some customers use piece description to describe the number of flips or cuts for a piece. And there are some people who have very, very well defined methods and rules for how everyone in their organization uses piece categories and piece descriptions. So this is really going to be a big win for all of those users who are very organized with how they use and name their piece categories or piece descriptions. So in Model Editor, if I go to 3D Positions in my View option, there are Assign by Category, Assign by Description, and Define. Now, you can define this without having a model open. It's not specific to a model, it's specific to a user. So it's going to create a file that is saved in your avatars folder. So you don't have to have a specific model open. But this is the model that we're going to take a look at this on. So this is what I have open, and I'm going to go ahead and click Define. I'm going to get a Define 3D Positions window. And here I can go through and enter my different piece categories, and then I can say which position and which body position that category matches. So I did some longhand piece categories here. So my shirt back, I've told the system that that should go on the back and be placed at about the chest level. And you can enter tons and tons and tons of these. And every time you enter either a category or a description, then the other field will be grayed out. So if you enter a description, notice as I start typing here, it grays out that category field. So in this one form, you define both categories and descriptions. Once you've done that, when you want to then set up your pieces, notice here I don't have any positions set up, and I don't have any body positions. I can go to View, 3D Positions, Assign by Category, because that's what I have defined in my system, and it will fill in all of that information for me. So think about all the models that you have already set up, but you now want to take those to the next step or take those to the next level and set them up for 3D. This is going to help you guys have really organized systems for managing your piece categories and piece descriptions out quite a lot, because it fills that in for you. So I'm not going to save this model so I can show you what that looks like in Pattern Design. So you do have the option to define or to assign these piece positions by category or description in Model Editor. My friend Vera Marion prefers to define hers in Model Editor. But it's really cool when you actually see what happens with it when you define them here in 3D. So notice I already have my pieces rotated correctly. And this is one of the big differences in the workflow and why my buddy Vera prefers to do her positions in the model, because the more information your model has before you go into 3D for the first time, the better it can do with helping you to rotate the pieces here in the workspace. If you don't have those positions set up in your model and you go into Pattern Design and you open in 3D, it's not going to do anything to try to help you figure out how these pieces should be rotated. So you'll have to rotate them yourself. For me, it's not a big deal. I can do it pretty quickly because I've done it a lot. So, that's just something to know, though, about the different workflows and why some may prefer to define it in Model Editor or to assign those positions in Model Editor. Here in Pattern Design, what I'm going to do in my piece panel here, my split button under Place gives me several options to use Place as it was designed for version 11. And then I also have Place by Category and Place by Description. Because I have categories defined, I'm going to click Place by Category, and it brings all of those pieces onto the avatar for me. At this point, all I have to do is make a few adjustments to the pieces. And I am ready to go. Okay, so that's Place by Category and Place by Description. So it's reading those fields from your model, the first page of your model editor, to help you position pieces in 3D a bit quicker. Again, for those of you who don't use piece categories already, maybe this is incentive to start using them. And if it's not, well, we have other options. You still can use the place piece function as it was designed in version 11. That still works. So for those of you who haven't had much experience working with that, I can run through that real quick. Actually, just going to close that and open another 3D so I get back to the beginning. Again, I already have my pieces rotated correctly. That's important to try to start always with having the pieces positioned correctly in the workspace. As the pattern maker, you are the person and the human being that actually knows how these pieces need to be positioned. AccuMark knows that it's a piece. It might understand a little bit about the notches and things like that, but they're all just shapes to the system. So you still need a human to sort of understand and interpret where the top or the bottom of a rectangle is. Maybe down the road, once we get some AI embedded in AccuMark, it can do better to help you figure those things out. But right now, it really relies on you to know your patterns. So with the place piece function, as it was designed for version 11, I just click place. Cylinder is going to be my default, so I make sure that's on cylinder. And then I can just go right ahead and start placing pieces on the avatar. One of the tricks to using this tool well is understanding what it does. So it uses the view and the angle that you're viewing to define your position. Remember, your position is going to be your front, back, side, top, bottom, those positions, right? So it's using your position here in your view to figure out what your position is. I'm in a front view, so it knows these pieces are front. And then I selected my chest cylinder, so okay, it knows it goes on the chest. And that's how it populates that information in Model Editor for you. So to see what happens when you do that wrong, note that when we're working within AccuMark 3D, we place our sleeves as a top, because if we look at the position of the avatar's arms, placing the piece as a side is going to, is more indicative of like the side panel for a jacket, a piece that's going to go here. But if you look from the top view, you see you have a perfect view of how you actually want to place that sleeve. So if I were to place that sleeve while I'm in a front view, the system assumes that it must be a front piece. And now it's on my cylinder sideways, right? So how do you correct that? Well, look from a top view and now assign that piece. Now you have the correct configuration. So I do the same thing for my other sleeve. These are two different sleeves with two different fabrics, so I have to place them separately. Then I'm going to go and take a back view, place my back pieces. And there we go. So again, just make some adjustments here. But definitely make sure you understand that it's using your angle of view to figure out what the positions for your pieces are. So a little V11 refresher. And you have lots of options. So you customers who don't use piece categories, don't worry. We are still looking out for you too. But again, it's never a bad idea to start using your piece categories. Okay, so you may notice that a few things have changed about the place on avatar ribbon as well. You used to have the options to sync with base size and to define alterations right here. We moved those up to the ribbon because we want to keep things here specific to place on avatar window. So these are all options that are really related to the view and what you're doing in place on avatar, where sync with positions really affects the positions of your pieces and the information that saves in the background of your model, that piece information. So we moved those up here to the ribbon, and we created this sizes panel for those. The other thing that's changed about this, we got rid of some functions that were here, the guys that went up to my sizes panel. We also added an option to show wireframe. Show wireframe just shows you the pieces. Instead of being solid, now they are showing you the virtual mesh. So it's showing you the mesh of those pieces. So pretty simple function. This is really helpful when you think about needing to see through a piece. if you have lots of pieces that are layered and things like that. So that's an easy way to see through the piece. Again, it does relate back to the size of your mesh. So I have a really large mesh. You can see here I have a 2-inch grid size. So I have a really large mesh displaying here. Okay. So the last quick little feature that I want to go over for, actually I have two more, sorry. I want to go over for what we've done to change things around in the in AccuMark 3D between Model Editor and PDS, is we have made the default for Show Stretched on. So what does that mean? You may have noticed from working in other versions of AccuMark 3D that when you sew a piece around the cylinder to itself, it's going to wrap that piece around the surface of the cylinder to make sure it captures the arm or the leg entirely. And in previous versions, that view was not always shown to the user. Now it's shown to the user as a V11, and then in V12 we made the default for that function on. So as soon as I assign relationships to my underarm seams, click OK, it wraps around the whole cylinder. And this is really necessary to make sure the users don't sew through the arms. And the reason you want that to be your default on, so you can see this view, is because now you see what the sleeve positioning will look like when the simulation begins, so you can make better decisions about the positioning. So if you need to make that longer or shorter, or even change the dimensions of the cylinder around the arm, you can do it to get the best positioning for the start of the simulation. As you have those defaults on. Whoops, so I can make my cylinder a little bit bigger. There you go. So that is a default of on now. The other cool thing is those of you who worked in other versions of AccuMark 3D will know that if you do all of your piece positioning and you change your avatar, older versions would default to the body positions for that avatar. Now it's going to hold the position of the pieces on the last avatar that was used. So before, if you change the avatar, all the pieces would move a little bit. Now the pieces stay in place and only the avatar moves. So if you have an avatar that's shorter or smaller, you have to move a little bit, but you're not losing the positions the way you were before. Generally speaking, what works for one avatar will work for the other avatars you will put in it, because you're not typically going to try the same garment on someone who is 6 foot tall, or a standard size adult, and then put the same garment on a kid and expect not to have to move the garment down a little bit and expect it to be oversized. Most of the avatars that you change are going to be just about the same size, so you now don't have to go through and reconfigure all of your positions. All right, well, thank you so much. That was part 1. We have a lot of other features in V12. That was one of the reasons for splitting up the webinars and the videos into segments, so that people could, sort of watch one when they have time, and really sort of spend more time focusing on certain areas. Usually in a webinar or a video, I'm trying to rush through all the functions. So this time, no, we'll chop it up, make it a little smaller, easier to digest, and I think it makes the information sharing a bit easier. So definitely let me know how you like this new format of splitting up the webinars and videos into segments. So again, that's it for part 1. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any well, hello friends. It's Christian again. I am here with part 2 of AccuMark 3D version 12, What's New webinar recordings. So we have separated ourselves or decided not to do the what's new for 3D in a webinar format where we have everyone dial in at the same time, because webinars are fickle and sometimes there are technical difficulties. So we figured it's just easier to record videos and then allow everyone to watch them on their own time. This also gives you the opportunity to pause the video if you have the software installed at that time and actually try things out as I'm educating you on what we've done for V12. So like I said, this is part 2. If you missed part 1, make sure you go ahead and watch part 1 first. It will help set up some of the features that I'm going to talk about in part 2. I tried to divide things pretty cleanly so that in part 1, we were really focused on the AccuMark 3D enhancements that you will use in Model Editor and what you will use in PDS and the AccuMark 3D workspace within PDS. And this time around, we're going to focus more on things in the 3D viewport, so things in that Blender viewport. So we have a lot of features there too. All right. So one thing I want to start with in the part 1 recording, I forgot to mention another very, very helpful feature that we've added, or really it's not a feature that we've added, but we've made a revision to a feature. Many of you know that when you export a zip, your AccuMark zip files, your 3D information goes with it. So when I say 3D information, I mean things like your piece setup. So if we look at what I have on the screen here, everything that I have set up that you're looking at in terms of the position of this shirt on the avatar and the stitching relationships, all of these things are saved in the background of my model. So if I were to zip this file and send it to one of my friends, if I send it to Sarah or Mary, they can open it on their systems and they'll already have this avatar installed because this is an avatar that's installed with AccuMark. So they can then take my model and open it without having to do anything extra. And that's just with your plain old AccuMark zip file, including components. Now, there was also, and there is also, an option to include 3D components. And we've had some users in the past have a little bit of confusion about when they use include components and when to use include 3D components. So we went back and we made a revision to this feature to allow users to use include 3D components, and it will only include the 3D components that relate to the model or models you are zipping at that time. So in the past, what include 3D components did was it tried to go through your system and sweep up and collect all of your fabric tables and avatars and everything in your fabrics folder. So it made this huge file that you were never able to email because it was so huge. Well, now the file sizes have gotten a little bit smaller because it's going to go in when you say include 3D components and find the avatar for that style and the fabric table for that style, the images associated with it. It is not going to grab avatars and images in the fabric tables that do not relate specifically to that style. So wonderful enhancement that I think will make sharing data, especially more a little easier for people within companies or those of you out there who are supporting customers. They can send you their data. Now, remember, once you have someone's avatar on your system, if someone creates a custom avatar, once they've sent it to you once and you've installed it in your system, if they have other models using that avatar, they don't need to include 3D components for you to have that avatar. They just need to do a regular old export zip and include components, and they'll be all set, good to go, and you'll be able to simulate. If for some reason you don't have the right avatar, you don't have the correct fabric table, AccuMark 3D will let you know. It'll say, hey, we don't have the fabric table for this style, at which point, if they need to send you a new one, they can send you a new fabric table. So I meant to include that on part 1, and I did not, so now there you have it. There have been changes to export zip and include 3D components. The other thing that I wanted to spend a little bit more time on from part 1 was the new piece properties function. So in part 1, we went over this great new function that allows you to go in and adjust the properties of a piece right here in pattern design, so you don't have to go out to model 3D garment properties or make these edits in your model anymore. So things like adjusting a layer. And you can adjust any other things here as well. If you want to change the wrap type of a piece or something like that, you can do all of that right here. There, I just changed my layer. I'm going to change it back. You do also have a multi-select. So I mentioned multi-select in the instance of like your shirt front or something like that. So I can multi-select and then change both pieces at the same time. So I've changed both of those layers there. One of the things that I forgot to mention is that when you're using this function, you don't have to include pieces that are flips when you're doing multi-select. So say, for example, with my sleeves, these are flips. I don't have to select both of them because properties still apply per piece, whether it's a flip or not. So if I select one sleeve and I make an adjustment, and I say, I don't know, what am I going to change? I'm going to change it to being flat pieces. I strike enter. It changes both of my sleeves here to being flat. So you don't have to use multi-select to make edits to things that are flips. It'll do that automatically. Okay, so we'll just go back and change those back to being on cylinders instead of being flat. There we go. All right, so with that, I'm just going to fix my sleeves here since I was playing around with them. With that, I'm going to go ahead and launch the simulation, and we're going to go to Blender. I have several models open here. So, better product for all of the customers out there that we are really focusing on, and we really want to make this the best product that we can for those who have to use it. So I'm just going to enlarge my buttons here so you guys can see them. There we go. Okay, so let me go ahead and allow this to simulate. So for those of you who don't know, to start and pause the simulation, you can do that with your keyboard. You don't have to select the button. You can use Alt-A. So that starts and stops the simulation. You may also notice that my avatar's arms are going down. That's something that we added. We added a library of 10 avatars that put their arms down. So that is something we also covered in part 1. But now you get another opportunity to see that in action. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down in my toolbar here. Oops, made my avatar smaller. Actually, I can go ahead and pause that simulation now. There we go. And one of the things that I want to mention is that the new avatars that we're including, most of them, including the avatars that you create with our new avatar editor, will have the points of measure displayed on the avatar. So I have all of those lines and points of measure there. And that's really great because then if I toggle the transparency on the garment, I can again cross-reference the garment with the points of measure on the body and make sure certain parts of the garment are hitting where they should be. So that's really helpful. But with that as well, you also have the option to show hide points of measure. So that's a simple and easy feature, but the new avatars that have points of measure marked on them, you can toggle those on and off if you need to. Okay, so with this garment, I want to spend some time to go over the new copy trim image function. So in 11.0, we added a piece properties panel. And before that, in 10.4 and 10.3, we did a lot to add trim image manipulation right here in the 3D viewport. So this is a big win for all those who have been working with the AccuMark digital printing workflow and all of the cool things that we've been adding for images in 2D. We try to make sure that we're adding things in 3D as well that's going to help users really get the most out of the full suite of AccuMark products. So what we've added recently to this panel is a copy trim feature. So you already had the option to add trim images, but when you're working in 3D, each piece maintains its own images. So for example, I want my picture of the Eiffel Tower here to carry over on his pocket. So to do that, before I would have to go to add, find this picture of my system and put it here, but then I'd also end up having to scale it to try to get the same scale that I have already. Well, now we've added this copy trim function, so I can just select copy trim, and I'll select my picture and then select which piece I want to place it on. I'm going to select the pocket, and there we go. And I know that this image is exactly the same scale as this one. It will try to maintain rotation as well, but when you make adjustments, or if you copy an image and you move it to the back, it may come in upside down because the UV map that we use, sort of the nest that 3D is referring to for the placement of these images, will usually place the back upside down. So you may have to just go to your properties panel here and rotate, but all in all, it's not bad. So now I just go here and I can move this guy down. I gave myself some lines here. So now I can place that perfectly. And this pocket is slanted a little bit when it was sewn on in the pattern to try to get it to be placed more upright on the shirt. But with that, I can still copy my trim image, add it here, and make sure I have my lines lining up perfectly. And then, of course, this change also syncs back to pattern design. So if I click Sync 3D Changes here, and then I'm going to open this style up in pattern design again, and click Sync 3D Changes here, now I have that placed perfectly on my pocket. Then save it, and I am ready to go off to the printer or to plot this pattern piece with the placement of these images there. So I'll go back here now. So one of the other cool features that we've added for V12 that we're all very excited about, is something people have been asking for quite a while, is the export image feature. Now, this is something that we're still working on, so we have a little bit more work to do that we'll keep cleaning this up between now. Right now we're in the process of beta testing V12, but between now at our position of being about halfway through the beta process, and before V12 is released, we will make some changes to this feature. So if you're watching this video and 12 has been released, you may notice the features are different. Well, okay, so I'm telling you why now. I just want to hide my avatar. So look at my garment here. And here is my export images panel. So the export images panel gives you several angles that you can choose from for your garment. So you can take your main view. I'm going to toggle perspective on there. Striking the 5 key on your number pad toggles perspective on and off. So I like to take images with perspective on. So I have this whole panel here for export images, and I can click and select which angles I want. Let's say for now, I'm going to do my front. I'm going to do 160 and do 300. I'm selecting completely random ones. So once I select which angles of rotation I want, I click export. And it's going to open up my export image manager, and it also gives me the option to do some manipulations with my layout. So you just give it a moment to process, and another miniature window will open up in a second here. There we go. Okay, so and these images are pretty high resolution, so from far back sometimes they can look a little strange, but they're okay. In this export images manager here, you have a few options. So you can click to select any one of your images, and notice when I do that, it gives me some information about that piece. So I can click and it tells me this is my 60-degree view, this is my 300-degree view. And each image also has a bounding box, so you can make one smaller or larger. Here you have horizontal, vertical, or grid to quick snap to certain angles. And do horizontal. And then I also here have some options to tell it to make my canvas scale automatically. So with automatic turned on, what that does is when I move images, you see how it's clipping my canvas for me. And this just makes sure you have an image that's pretty tight. It's automatically going to export with a transparent background, so it can go right into any presentations or things like that that you may have that you want to put this in. So I'm just going to keep moving these guys to find a layout I like. That looks pretty cool. And once I'm done with that, I can go ahead and save this. So I'm going to say I want to do 300 dpi because we love large images. And I have the option to click Save Files Individually. What Save Files Individually will do is it will create an individual PNG for each one of my angles here. But once I click Save, just go right here into my V12, name this image test. Now it saved this image out and saved the individual files. So I'm just going to find that folder. Here are my individual angles saved out for me. Notice the images are cleaned up and clipped already. And now there's my trio and my layout. Great, so that's export image. There are lots of other features hidden in this little export image window too. We had an intern spend the whole summer working on this, and then the rest of our engineering team plugged it into AccuMark after the internship was up. But I think all in all, the team did a really great job. I'm really excited about this feature. But within this window as well, you also have the option to save layout. So if I want to do more of this layout with other garments, if I click Save Layout, when I come back in with another garment, I can click Export Last Layout, and it will take the new garment and set it up in the same configuration that I just created, and I won't have to open up the Export Image Manager or anything like that. I'll be all set and ready to go. Okay, so another button here in my Export Images panel is Export Turntable. This is also a feature that people have been asking for a while. So what Export Turntable does, I am going to go to my very full desktop, and I'm going to create a new directory. Save this, Paris t-shirt test. I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to click Export Turntable. What this is going to do, and it's going to take a while, but it's going to take 36 images. So every 10 degrees of my garment, it takes an image, and then it's going to dump all of those images into this folder. So this is another quick way if you want to get even more angles than we allow you to select from. You can get all 36 just by doing Export Image, and it will save out pretty high resolution images for you. And then it will also add an HTML file, and then you can send these images and the HTML file to someone who doesn't have AccuMark, someone who doesn't have Blender, and they'll be able to spin this around and take a look at it. Okay, so that took a few minutes to create this turntable image, but now I am, notice, in Google Chrome, just in a web browser. And I can turn my t-shirt around. So it moves a little slow because the images are pretty high res. But all in all, I think this is a great feature. I hope you guys enjoy it and give us some good feedback on it. Well, give us any feedback that you have. And any feedback that you have will be good to hear, whether or not the feedback itself and the tone of what you're saying is good. We take all of your feedback seriously, and we are delighted to hear it so that we can move the product forward. Okay, we're going to take a look at an older style. Here's our good old friend Stan. Everybody remember Stan? Let me launch this simulation. All right, so I'm using a pretty wide grid here just for demoing to the field purposes. So I'm going to go ahead and start my simulation. Allow those pieces to come together. I'm using Stan for a reason because my buddy Stan here has been good to us over the years, but he has a very interesting arch to his body here. He's sort of leaning back a little bit. So then what's happening to the fit of my shirt here is that it's sort of hiking up a little bit. Well, we have some cool new features that I cannot wait to show you. Let me make my buttons bigger again. There you go. To do that, I just make sure my arrow, my cursor is pointing. To make the buttons bigger in Blender, temporarily, what I can do is just point my cursor here and then use the minus and plus key on your number pad. It'll make your buttons bigger. All right, so with my simulation running, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to use my freeze piece. It's a new feature for V12 to select the collar band and freeze that. And now I'm going to select from release stitching, seam, and I'm going to release his neck. I'm going to release shoulder seam, and I'm going to release shoulder seam there. All right. Now you'll notice they're coming together. Oops, I didn't release on this side. Let me put this guy here. Right. So I've released the seam, so it's like the stitching isn't here. We still have the connection points, but that's fine. And now using my live drag, another new feature for V12, I'm going to go here and I can tug on his shirt because what I want to do is get my shirt to be balanced here. So I have a shirt with stripes on it for a reason, so I can try to see when they're going a little bit more straight. I can even go in the back here and tug that guy up a little bit. Okay, and now on my shirt, I can kind of see a little bit of the pattern adjustments that maybe I need to make to help this guy be a little bit more balanced. The shirt's still not quite perfect, but it's a big improvement, and you guys can see a little bit of what those features can do together. So what I did again, I froze my collar stand, so that makes that piece frozen and deactivate it from the stitching. And then I also went and used my release seam to go through and release the shoulder seam here, and also the neckline. And now if I want to get an idea of how far apart this is so I can see what kind of adjustment I might want to make, I just go to my extended tools tab and use my measure tools that have been here since version 1, measure straight, and say, okay. And I can see that we need about roughly 1.5 inches of space there. So that's about how much that's released. I can also take some off of my back neck there maybe. But yeah, so that is freeze piece, release seam, release stitching rather, and live drag. Live drag is great because while your simulation is running now, it gives you the option of dragging. So I can tug on things. Now this depends very heavily on your system performance. So if you have a system that is not up to spec, this is a reason to update because this works much better when you have a system that has a lot of power behind it. Live drag only works while the simulation is running. So if I disable my simulation there, you see live drag is now disabled and deactivated. Cool beans. So let me go ahead. I want to show you guys another style and another application for freeze piece. Okay, so I'm going to open my polo style. Okay, and open 3D. Perfect. And I am going to simulate this style too. Again, I'm leaving my grid size large here just so the simulation runs quickly. Perfect. So with my freeze piece options, I can do quite a lot. When a piece is frozen, it is completely deactivated from the simulation at that time. So think about doing multiple layers in a garment. Think about when you have multiple garments in a simulation. Freeze gives you the option to freeze all. So that's what I'm going to do. And when pieces are frozen, you have the option to do show hide frozen. So all the frozen pieces, it's like they're not even in the simulation. Okay, so all of my pieces are frozen. I'm going to allow my simulation to start running. So I'm going to do Alt-A. And now I can selectively unfreeze pieces. So I'm going to go to freeze piece and unfreeze my front and back. Right click to exit the function, and they come together. Isn't that cool? Okay, and then let's see, what do I want to do next? Let's do these guys up here. So I'm going to go freeze piece, select that piece, and this piece, and this piece. Okay, it's all looking good. So I'm going to do my collar now. Super fantastic. And now let's go ahead and get these last few guys on there. So some of the other tricks and things that you can do with freeze piece, I think it is amazing. Another thing that you can do, so we know collars are something that can be a little difficult to simulate, especially when you're in a 3D environment. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause my simulation. I'm going to start over. And this time I am just going to freeze my collar. Okay. And now I allow my simulation to run. Everything comes into place. Great. I'm going to click move. Grab my collar, strike my Z key so it locks to the Z axis and move that straight down. Okay, my simulation is still running. You see I still start pause there. And now I'm going to do unfreeze all. So that's a really quick and easy way to get a really great result with your collar. So it's much easier than it's been in other versions. So, woohoo! Okay, so now, dun dun dun. All of you, I'm sure, have heard a lot about what we have been doing with Avometric. Avometric is now officially a part of the Gerber team, so we're all excited. We are one big team now, and we're already working together very well, and now we're able to take that to the next level. So we're all super excited. So version 12 has enhanced functionality with the Avometric engine. So any of you who experimented in version 11 know that was our introduction to Avometric, and now we have even more things going on, and it's really great. So in your physics modes, under your engines, you'll have two options. You have the Avometric Phase 2 engine, which is going to give you the best results. And then you also have an Avometric Draft mode. Avometric Draft mode is a version of the Avometric engine that does not subdivide the meshes as small, so that means it runs faster. So if you want performance and you want to get the simulation quick, use Avometric Draft mode. If you want all the detail, like the fine wrinkles and things like that, you're going to want to go with Avometric Phase 2. Okay, so those of you who worked in version 11 know that when you're working with the Avometric engine, you have to allow the garment to go through a process called frame zero, or process frame zero. What frame zero is a state where the garment brings all the pieces together so that it can apply the physics. The Avometric engine requires the pieces come together without any collisions before it can apply its physics to get the great looking simulations. And that frame zero processing happens right here in our AccuMark 3D PDS work area. Now, when you have one of the Avometric engines selected, either Phase 2 or Draft mode, frame zero is going to kick off automatically. With Avometric engines, you can also start with a larger grid size. I have to apologize to my friends outside of the US. I am working in imperial right now. I'm in inches, so forgive me. But in metric, you guys can work in the Avometric engine with a 1.5 centimeter grid or even a 2 centimeter grid and get a great result, maybe up to 2.5 centimeters. That's what I'm at right now with my 1 inch. So frame zero, I am going to review something that we added in 11.0, which is ordered sewing. Frame zero needs the pieces to come together, as I said, without collision. So sometimes it's helpful for you to be able to select which order you're going to have the pieces process in. So ordered sewing allows you to do just that. With ordered sewing enabled here in my test panel, I'm going to click cloth simulation. Nothing happens yet because it's waiting for input from me. I'm going to hold control and select my front and back. Those pieces turn green and they come together. And it'll say processing, please wait. And when it's done with that level, it'll ask you for the next one. Okay, select your next pieces. I'm going to go ahead and do my sleeves. Processing sewing, please wait. Okay, now it's done. I want to select my pocket and my neck. Once this comes together without collisions, it'll go right to help with the simulations. I'm going to close this because in V12, the engineering department made some enhancements that help Frame Zero process better on its own. And what it does is automatically it will process each piece based on which layer number it's assigned to. So I'm going to go ahead and make some adjustments real quick. I'm going to go to my piece properties, and I'm going to give my neckband a higher layer because I want that to go last. I'm going to also adjust it. So let me move it down. Perfect. Now, as of V12, if I'm using the Abametric engine and I do cloth simulation, let me hide my avatar, I'll just zoom in a little bit there. I'm going to click cloth simulation, and it's going to process Frame Zero, and notice it does the layers that are lowest first. So those were layer 1, then we have layer 3, and now layer 4 and 5. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pause my simulation. With the Abametric engine, we do get material thickness. So once you pause the simulation, it will extrude on the edges and you'll see the material thickness. There we go. We have our oversized nightshirt. Okay, so what else do we need to go over at this point? We still have more features to go. So we've sort of gone over Abametric features. We have gone over our freeze piece options, our release seam, live drag, copy image, show high points of measure, export zip, talked a little bit more about piece properties, and we're still not done, folks. So stay tuned for part 3. In part 3, we need to talk about Visu images, render mode, and avatar edit, which were all things that we developed early on and had our own little opportunities to test it in a very limited release called 11.1 that we really only worked on internally because we wanted some extra time to really test these features. So yes, more to go. This has been another interesting installment. Thank you guys so much for watching. So I'll conclude much like I concluded part 1. We are very anxious to hear your feedback on all the features that we have been developing, what else you guys need to really make this product successful and to make you successful. So let us know what you need. We're excited that you're working in V12. Welcome. And again, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. V12 What's New document, we actually wrote up manual style. So it's written as it would be in a manual. So you have step-by-step how to use the features. So it took us a little bit more time to write it, but I think it was worth it. In that, you also have helpful hints. So one of them being things to help you decide when to use a Gerber engine, meaning your alternate, default, or draft engines, or the avometric engines, which would be your avometric phase 2 and avometric draft mode. So there's lots of helpful information there. We have a checklist. There are certain features that we've implemented and we could implement for the Gerber engines a little bit easier. So for example, you'll notice now that I have an avometric simulation up. My release stitching and freeze piece options are grayed out because they don't work with the avometric engine quite yet, but we're working on it. So if you have reviewed your what's new and you have feedback on that as well, we'd love to hear it. So thank you, and stay tuned for part 3. Hello, 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 and welcome to part 3. Part 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Part 3 of the AccuMark 3D version 12 What's New videos. You have made it. So hopefully if you're at part 3, that means you also viewed part 1 and part 2. So no skipping. Part 1 and part 2 set a great foundation for what we will talk about now. So the method for how the videos were set up, if you have watched the others, you are well aware of now. But in video 1, in part 1, we covered most of the enhancements and changes that affect Model Editor, Pattern Design, AccuMark Explorer, as it relates to AccuMark 3D. In part 2, we got to take a look at things that are going on in the 3D viewport. So lots of really cool and fun features there. And now what we're going to do in part 3 is take a look at some of the other features, and these are all pretty big features that we're going to go over today, or during this video. But they really deserve their own space. So here we go. I do have a few other quick things that I wanted to mention, or things that we need to talk about before we dive in completely. Just small things. So we spoke already about the changes to the AccuMark 3D ribbon. So the 3D ribbon for V12 is different than it has been in previous versions. All these new features, we had to make room for them. The Preferences tab panel here has also changed up a bit. So grid size has moved. We tried to give the options here a configuration that is a little more visually pleasing, but it's still not quite there yet. But just so you know, grid size has moved. So don't confuse your grid size with your hem mass multiplier. And there are some options that have been taken out of the Preferences tab. So we looked at things that people don't change very often or don't use very much, and they were things like the layer spacing or the checkbox to start simulation as soon as the simulation begins. So those have been moved to your preferences in edit here. So if I go to customize preferences and take a look at my 3D tab, that layer spacing option is right here. And I also have the checkbox to have my simulation start. Now, for those of you who aren't aware of what this does, the checkbox to start simulation will make the simulation start as soon as Blender opens. Me personally, I like to let Blender open and then start the simulation myself, because sometimes I may make adjustments to the pattern pieces before the simulation starts. I may want to freeze some of the pieces like we did in that cool demonstration of freeze piece in video 2. So I prefer to work with start simulation unchecked, but this is totally up to you. The other thing that we've added here in the Preferences tab while we're here is in V12 you have the option to change the color of your place an avatar window to a gradient. So you've always been able to adjust that color, but now you can adjust the color to a gradient. So you have an avatar top color and an avatar bottom color, and changing that bottom color is going to give you that sort of a result. And that just adds a sense of depth to that window. So just something else to know you have there. I'm going to change mine back to white. White is more documentation friendly. All right, so time to dive right in. One of the changes that we made in V12 that was a game changer for us is adding support for different texture maps. So those of you who are very 3D savvy know that there are several optical scanners on the market, and these optical scanners capture different versions of your image to allow you to create 3D textures of your fabric. It makes it look a little more realistic. So these scanners would be like the Visu scanner, or products designed and created by X-Rite that just capture images of fabrics and materials so that you can bring those into 3D and get something that looks a lot more realistic. So I am going to go to my Model 3D garment properties and we can take a look at our fabric table. And your fabric table is where you're going to add those Visu or X-Rite images. And they come in the form of separate image maps that can be saved out as raster images like TIFFs or JPEGs or PNGs. And notice now in your fabric table at the end here, you have spaces to import things like reflection maps, specular maps, which relate to how shiny something is, height, texture, roughness, and the transparency, and all those maps now can go in your fabric table. So you see here down at the bottom of this fabric table, I already have some loaded. Okay. So we also added the option, if you do have a Visu scanner, there is an option to import XText textures in your right-click menu from your fabric table. So when you're in the fabric table, you just right-click on an entry, and then you can click Import XText, and it will give you an option to navigate to that XText file on your system. The XText file is the proprietary format, or the type of file that the Visu scanner creates. So if you guys are working with a Visu scanner, then you can import all those maps directly into your fabric table. Yes, I am sure I would like to exit. Click OK. So I have those textures applied here on my fabric, on my pieces. So you can see the textures look a lot nicer. And then when we simulate later, you'll see what that looks like in 3D. And this is something that's super essential for render mode. So in V12, we now have the option to create photorealistic rendering. And to do that and to get the best quality, you want to have these texture maps applied. So we have some libraries and some fabrics that we've scanned that we can share. And you also have the option to take a texture that has been scanned and then drop another color onto it. So if it's not exactly the color you want or the material you want, if you have a print or something like that, you can drop that on top and still get that photorealistic look. So with that said, we're going to move on to another exciting feature, and that's our new avatar edit option and our new avatar edit platform. So my veterans of AccuMark 3D know that in previous versions of our avatar edit, you had to open a model in PDS, you had to launch the simulation, and then edit the avatar in Blender. We're still editing the avatars in Blender, but now the edit has its own platform. So you don't have to go into launching a style to do it. You don't even have to have 3D open. So if I were to close this window, let me save first. Yes. Here in the 2D workspace, I still have the option to launch my avatar editor. So you don't have to open a style or anything. You just have to open PDS and make sure you have a work area or open. So close that, just make sure you have something. and then you can log. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and open my Holo back up so that once we're done editing, I'll be ready to go. Okay, so the new avatar edit platform. This is what it looks like. I know it's not incredibly beautiful, but we'll beautify it later. We've been focusing on trying to get the features and functions in that people have been requesting. So it's important to note this is a completely new platform. It is not at all built on top of what we've had previously. So that means that there are some features that we've had before that we don't have now. But when you see what we have, I think you'll understand that it's a great trade-off. So we are building again from the ground up, and we have taken an approach that allows customers to configure their own points of measure, to place their own points of measure, and then edit the circumferences of the avatar in those places. So it's a lot going on. I think this has been a great effort. I really applaud our engineering department for getting this done and so wonderfully. We're also excited to hear your feedback. Let us know what would make this better for you. So in this avatar edit platform, you have three options here. You can load from a library of avatars we provide. This will include 10 adults, 5 male, 5 female, from sizes 2 to 24 for the females and size 34 to 58 for the males. Those are American sizes, pretty close to American ASTM standard sizes. And you can bring those avatars into this platform to see what the measurements are yourself. So if you want to know how that compares to a European size, you can bring those in here and measure them yourself. So you also have the option to revise. If you create an avatar with this platform, you can bring that avatar back in later if you decide you want to adjust one of the circumferences. You will not be able to move the points of measure on an avatar you're revising, but you can take the points of measure that are there and make them bigger or smaller. And then you have an option to load a scan. So this would be like loading a body scan, importing an OBJ. This is the platform for where that will happen now. So in previous versions, you had an import OBJ option in pattern design. Now you're going to launch the avatar editor and bring that body scan in here. If that body scan is of good quality, it's clean and it's symmetrical, it's pretty close to being symmetrical, you will also be able to place points of measure on that avatar and make circumference adjustments if you need to. So this is a pretty powerful tool. I'm going to go ahead to get started and just load from library. And here's that library of 10 adults that I told you about. You also can edit the child and baby now. These 12 avatars that you have here, baby, child, and then 10 adults, these are all just gray colored avatars. So they don't have skin and they don't have hair. They're just bodies. So these were generated mostly from body scan data. So they have bodies that have very human-like shapes. So this is going to make your simulations look better, all around win-win. We also have our friends Jane and Jennifer here. So you can edit Jane and Jennifer. Jane and Jennifer do have hair and they do have skin tones. So these look a little more realistic. They don't look completely human, but if you want this look instead of the gray avatar, then you have this as an option. So this is my friend Jennifer. All right, so now that I have imported this avatar, you can change your units here to inches or centimeters. I'll go ahead and work in centimeters. And then you have the option to rotate the avatar as well if you need to. The avatars that we provide in the library are already rotated correctly, so you don't need to make any special rotations. But those of you who've tried to import avatars in the past know that sometimes the avatar file or the OBJ that you've been given from a body scanner may not come into AccuMark facing the correct direction. They may have their back to you, or they may actually be horizontal in the viewport. Well, this gives you the option now to adjust and rotate X, Y, and Z. Okay, so the avatar edit platform for V12, you have to work in order. And the order is you adjust the height and inseam first. So these are your horizontal or your vertical measurements. And then you can go to points of measure and load your points of measure, where you'll have the option to create new points of measure, delete points of measure, and define your own. You can even save your own points of measure, and then when you load the next avatar, it will have those points of measure. And then after you've done those steps, you can go and adjust their circumference measurement. So you can change the hip, the bust, and all those, wherever you place a point of measure, you can make an adjustment there. Now, the system gives you full control. So if you enter crazy measurements, you can get crazy results. So be proud of yourself if you do that. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and start by editing my height. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and enter the measurements for my height. I want to change her height to being 166.25. And this is measuring from the floor to the top of her head. And then I'm going to adjust her inseam as well to being 77.5. All right. In this dialog, you have the option to scale the arm length with the torso. This is something I recommend. One of the issues, one of the things that we still have to work through with this avatar edit platform is perfecting how we can adjust the arm length. Right now, the arm length measurement is not measured in a way that you can actually measure with a tape measure. So we'll work on that, but fret not. When I show you what we can do with this platform, you'll still see the point and where we're going, and you can kind of get an idea with where we want to take this for the future. So we are going to continue to build on it. But I do recommend leaving scale arm length with torso on. And then you can turn scaling on or off. Scaling is going to take whatever adjustments you make to the avatar's height, and it will adjust their circumference measurements proportionally. So I'm going to leave both of those on and click OK. Okay, and once I click OK, it goes ahead and it adjusted the avatar's height for me. There we go. Now that I've adjusted the height, I can go and load points of measure. So I was playing around with my friend Alex, AccuPlan product owner and 3D enthusiast, earlier, and we were adding points of measure. And one of the ones that I added was just this XYZ as a test. So I'm going to go ahead and delete XYZ, because that's not what I need. To delete a point of measure, you go in the points of measure box here, and you have add, delete, move, and then you have torso, leg, and arm as options. I'm going to click torso, and then I'm going to select this one, and you just click to select and click OK. There you go. I've deleted it. Now, if I want to move one, like say I want to move my low waist because that's a little high, I'm going to go to move, torso, and I'm going to click low waist. Now, there is no visual feedback when you click. So just click right on that anchor and you've got it. And now move it to where you want it. Click OK. There you go. And you'll notice that the measurement updated as soon as I did that. Perfect. All right, and if you want to add more points of measure, if you have points of measure that are specific to your type of garment or things like that, you can also add them. So let's say we're going to add a high waist measurement. That would be great. I'm going to click add here, and then you see I can just scroll this guy, I click there, and then what's this? We're going to say high waist. Click OK, and you see it's added that custom point of measure. So once I've created my point of measure, if I want to save these, so when I load other avatars, it has this configuration, I can click save. And now it's kept a record of this. So when I load another avatar, it will have that high waist measurement. And it will use the same percentages to sort of figure out where they should be on that avatar, and you can always move and adjust them. All right, so once that part is done, I can go ahead and I'm going to say resize. And this is going to open up my options to resize down here. So click resize. Now notice my points of measure have grayed out. I cannot go back and adjust my point of measure now. So even if I bring in an avatar that I'm revising, you can't do that. So make sure you are very confident in the placement of those points of measure. All right, and I am going to open up a duplicate window. Blender has this really cool tool that allows you to have multiple windows open. And it's just the same thing there, but I want to have multiple angles so we can see from the side a little bit as I'm going to make adjustments here. And I click in this window. All right, so I am going to make adjustments to a few of her measurements here. To make an adjustment to a specific area of the body, you're going to want to go in that area. You see we have a torso, a leg, and an arm region, and you want to activate the fields that you're going to adjust. So let me make this window a little bit bigger. You want to activate the fields you're going to adjust. So in this case, I'm going to adjust the hip, waist, and chest. Notice my high waist measurement that I plotted, this is a custom point of measure, is here. So if I wanted to edit that one as well, I could. Any field that is not activated is going to scale with the avatar as I adjust these other measurements. So for example, and what I mean by that is if I decide that these are the measurements that I have, my customer has told me I have a chest, waist, and height of X, Y, and Z. But then I look at other measurements. Say the customer also provided an underbust, and the underbust measurement just happened to be 72.7. I can activate that field, and then this number will not change as I make adjustments. So any active field is going to adjust to the value you type in. So if you don't type in a value at all, it'll stay where it is. And if you do type in a value, it will adjust when we resize. Now, any of these fields that are unactivated will scale proportionally. And we did this because a lot of times customers would give us avatar measurements, but they wouldn't have a complete set. They would only have certain measurements, and then they just need the rest of the body to sort of go in line with those measurements. So this is how you do that. So I'm going to actually deactivate underbust, and I'm going to enter my measurements here. So my chest, I'm going to change to 89.5. My waist, I'm going to change to 72.5. And my hip, I'm going to change to 95.25. Okay. Once you enter your measurements, and this is where you're going to want to pay close attention to our girl here. Once you enter your measurements, then you want to go and say resize. And this is going to take those measurements and apply those to the avatar. So we can see here her body has changed. All right. If you need to add more measurements, then you would just go ahead and add in those fields and then click resize, and it would update again. Once you're done, then you just go here and you enter a name for your avatar. Strike the enter key, and then you can save. This is going to put this avatar in your avatars folder. So in earlier versions of AccuMark 3D, we also had customers trying to create plus size avatars. And when you try to create a plus size avatar from an avatar that began at like a size 2, that is problematic because then the shape usually ends up being not correct. So here's an avatar that is a plus size body already, and you can see her shape is a lot more natural than it would be if we tried to get this body type from Jill. So the process would be the same. You are going to modify your height if you need to make any adjustments there. So it's going to load the points of measure long enough to adjust the height and scale those, and then go ahead and make any adjustments that you need to, the same way we did with our Jennifer avatar. And again, same rules and standards for even your baby and your child. So then if we load points of measure, I didn't edit the height there, I closed out of it. If we load points of measure, then you'll notice that I also have that same high waist that I added there because I saved it. So if I didn't save my points of measure here, it wouldn't have retained this. But what you can do is configure it specifically for your company. So if you have a certain standard set of POMs, point of measure, then you can go ahead and add those here. When you're using one of the avatars that are just gray or bodies, you also have the options to change the color. And in the avatar edit documentation, we have some recipes for some colors if you want something that is close to skin tone. But keep in mind that these avatars and these colors are just solid colors, so it's never going to look like a skin tone, but you do have the options to change the color. So if you want a dress form, or if you want an avatar that looks more like a store mannequin or something like that, then you could apply color. So if you wanted it to be white or black or any color of the rainbow, you can create that with your color picker here. Okay, so then I'll also just really quick load and let you guys see our baby. So there's our little guy. And you can edit his POMs as well. So there you go. And that is avatar edit. So I am going to close this. And I'm going to save. Now that I'm back in pattern design, I want to go ahead and use the avatar I just created. So I'm going to go right click menu, model 3D garment properties, and in my avatars folder, I can use that avatar that I just created. When you use an avatar that's Jane or Jennifer, note in the place on avatar window, she will appear to be gray. This is okay. Don't worry or be alarmed. All right. Now to simulate this style, I'm going to use some of the tricks that we learned in the second video. So I'm going to start by freezing my collar. And then I'm going to allow the rest of the garment to simulate. If you look here, you can see I have those Visu textures applied, so you can see how much more realistic my fabric looks now. Notice my avatar Jennifer also has point of measure that I can show and hide. And now that my shirt is looking like it's in a decent position, I'm going to go to move. Bring this lower. And then I'm going to click unfreeze. Okay, and pause my sim. Oops. See, I have problems back here, a few little collisions. So I'm going to neutralize those by just using my move tool. Okay, so now, sort of our grand finale here for our 3D What's New videos for V12. Let's talk about render mode. At the bottom of the Gerber tab, or not all the way at the bottom, but close, overview material, you have the option to toggle render mode. Render mode is another one of those things that is very system performance specific. So you really want to make sure you have a powerful computer if you're going to do lots of renders. I'm going to enter render mode. And rendered images are done as 2D images. So every time I move my avatar or I move around here, note you see how it gets grainy again? Well, it's restarting that process each time you move, because it's going to take the 2D image that you're seeing on your screen now and then go through and pixel by pixel create a photorealistic rendered image. Now, in this setting here, you'll see that you have a background, like she's at a photo studio. This is there to help reflect the light better, but if it's in your way, you can always just right click and then strike the delete key and click OK, and that will delete the background. This also helps your simulation run a little bit faster too, or your render. So then here at the top of the screen, you can also see it's telling you about how long the rendering will take. But already we're able to see a big difference in the quality of our simulation. All right, so we're done rendering. I sped that up using a little movie magic, so we didn't actually have to wait. But this is the result of the simulation rendered now, and you can see that looks a lot better than the standard view that you get with AccuMark 3D. So that's render mode. Now, the easiest thing to do is to just take a screenshot now if you want to capture images of your render. We are working on having render mode collaborate with the export image feature that we saw in the video 2 of the series. And you'll notice that that button is still there. We have some more work to do on that, so give us some time, and by the time V12 is released, it should be good to go. For those of you who aren't watching until after V12 was released, then you're all set. But for this round of beta, we're still working on that. That's an area that we're still cleaning up and improving. Now, you can show and hide your avatar in this mode when you're in render mode, but every time you make a change, so if you move the avatar or anything like that, you're going to have to allow it to render again. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the avatar and get us a closer view of the garment. And then we're just going to let this render again with the help of some movie magic. Okay, so the render is complete. And like I said, now you can take screenshots. I'm going to go ahead and grab one right now myself. And go ahead and clip it in Paint or edit it in Photoshop, but you have your rendered image. Like I said, we're creating new ways and easier ways to export these images once you've rendered them. So we'll keep plugging away at that. Well, friends, pat yourself on the back if you are now at the end of video 3, because you have made it through 3 what's new videos for AccuMark 3D V12. I really do hope you see some progress. I hope there are some features that you're excited to experiment with and use. If you are playing around with these features and you have input or you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Again, I cannot stress that enough.